Aye, kuwe kuwa maduwe.
Aye, kuwe maduwe.
Aye, kuwe kuwa maduwe.
Aye, kuwe maduwe.
And you said when you moved to East Oakland, that was the first time that you had been in an all kind of, or majority, at least majority black school.
Absolutely.
And did that change once you went, you know, as you went to higher grades, high school and stuff, or?
Well, when I got to junior high school, the school was predominantly black. It wasn't a whole lot of white folks there. And, you know, the race thing was big back then. You know, we were in the midst of, you know, the Malcolm X, the Martin Luther King, and all this kind of stuff, right? And some of us really took sides. We took sides in a strong way. Like, you know, we black and we proud. You know, I don't want to use the language we use sometimes, you know, but we definitely had a thing about letting white folks know that we wasn't too fond of them, you know, and verbally and physically. So we would have, you know, a situation where we would have what we call riots, and the white people at the school, we would just start, you know, getting at them and physically, you know. I ended up going to juvenile hall behind, you know, that whole situation. My first time in being incarcerated was because we had started a riot with these white guys, and we just, some random white guys, we just decided we were going to put them, you know, we were going to handle them, and the police took us in. So, you know, there was a lot of that going on back then. You know, there were certain areas in the city that you just couldn't go to. You couldn't be there because at a certain time, even in the broad daylight, you know, they would sick their dogs on us. Wow. You know, yeah, up in the hills, Oakland Hills. So that was part of the growing up as well. You know, as you know, on the positive side, you know, when we moved to East Oakland out of Brookfield, you know, I established some really close friendships. Had my first girlfriend, official girlfriend, you know, stuff like that. So there were some memories that were really nice, but some of it wasn't as nice. Because also there was still that thing about, you know, people kind of clicked up. You know, they had their own little cliques, right? So if you go to a certain area, black folks, you're gonna have to take your buddies with you because it may go down. Right, you know, if you go to a certain party in a certain area, you gotta have your folks with you because it's gonna go down. So the violence kept happening, man. I mean, I've seen a lot of violence coming up, man. You know, it's just the way it was. Just normal kind of lifestyle stuff, right? Yeah. So, but you know, I have made some really close friendships as well. You know, we had a lot of fun, partying, dancing. We used to like to. The thing that in Oakland, East Oakland, coming up in East Oakland, I think this, I don't know how important this is, but I'm gonna say it. The important thing for the crowd I ran with and a lot of the men, young men that I associated with, and the other guys that I didn't really know that well, was we would dress to the T. You know, you had to have girls, you know, you had to know how to fight. Those are the three most important mechanisms or defining moments, qualifications for manhood at that time. Know how to dress, you got a girl, and you can throw them things. You ain't like that, you need to get to step in and be able to run because it's gonna go down. You know, we really prided ourselves in dressing and having the right colors coordinated, and the jeans starts to the bone, and the shoes shine at the toe. We used to wear Stacey Adams, and the toe would be shinier than any other part of the shoe. You know, so that was our claim. That's what we did, man.
I heard that. Did you have any, I guess, favorite spots that you used to go to?
Royal Park.
Royal Park. Okay.
We used to go up there. And they had a little rec center where we would have parties and dances. I mean, you bring memories back now, bro. Because back in the day, it was James Brown was the hot item, right? Yeah. And maybe put on the James Brown song, and man, cats would be like skating. You know, James Brown did this dance called a skate. Yeah. You know, some of the guys really knew how to skate, and they would like form a circle. They would be skating and stuff. But then the other piece that was real predominant in that time, as far as the entertainment and dancing and all that stuff, was like slow dancing. I'm talking about grinding, right? So we'd have what we call like red light parties. Sometimes we'd be in the garage and we'd have the lights down real low. And you put on a certain song, turn the lights completely out, and you make sure you get a girl that knew how to grind real good. Oh, man. Them was the days, boy. Man, they had y'all young, though. See, there was one favorite song we had, man. It's called Stay in My Corner by the Dells.
I hear that.
Stay in the corner. There was a part of that song he held a note for a long time. Stay. And that's when the get down was really, you was really getting in it then. I mean, getting in it, man, you with your girl, right? Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I didn't know I was going to say all this.
No, now you're remembering the good times. Now you think about it. That's what it is. Really,
well, you know, there also was this. I was really athletic and real good at it. And I remember me and a couple of my buddies, we used to always go to these schools or go to these parks that had a fence, and we'd have a tennis ball and a bat, and we'd always be going for the fence and throwing, trying to strike each other out. And I was real good at playing baseball. And sometimes we'd go to Royal, we'd play football, and we'd be tackling, man. We wasn't doing no touch.
Full contact.
Full contact, man. Coming home dirty, all bruised up, and the whole nine, man. Yeah. It was really interesting in those times, man.
Okay. Did you play in school too?
Well, I ended up playing. We called it Pony League. And I started playing like organized baseball over at Greenman Field. Okay. And then it went on to Babe Ruth, and so I got really good at baseball. You know, really good. I mean, to the point where I was like one of the star players, second base, shortstop. Okay. Yeah, I was really good at baseball.
I hear that. Yeah. Could you state your name, please?
My name is Quinton Sankofa.
Quinton Sankofa. Well, thank you so much.
You asked about the journey.
Yes, asking about
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna tell you this. This is, I think, funny when I look back on it. So growing up, I did well in school. You know, it came easy to me. I was able to, get good grades or whatever. And, as I grew older, that became less cool, right? Like, as I got into puberty and stuff, now it's all about attraction and like romance and like, wow, like how can I get with the girls, And so school became less important to me because it didn't seem to be important to the girls. You know what I'm saying? What seemed to be important was being tough. And I was like, okay, well, I am tough too. So let's do that. Let's lean into that. So I went through a whole little phase in middle school where I actually ended up failing. I failed the 8th grade. It was so silly. Being young and dumb, I thought I had some things figured out, right? I was like, there's this thing called the Ohio State Proficiency Test. I'm sure there's like state equivalents here, but when I was growing up, this was the test that you had to pass before you left high school, no matter what. Like you could get all your grades and all your credits, but if you didn't pass this proficiency test, then that said you weren't ready for graduation. And so for me, I remember, we would take the prep test in middle school because it's a test that you get to take, I think, in your 8th grade year, and you have every year there to pass it until you graduate, right? And so I remember them making a big deal about it in school and everything like this. And I was not doing well in school at all. Not because I wasn't intelligent, but I just was going through some things and was like, whatever, I was just checking out. And I had this plan in my mind, right? I was like, well, if I pass the proficiency test, then clearly I'm ready to go on to the next grade. Like whatever they're teaching me in this class, whatever. As long as I pass this proficiency test, they'll know I'm ready for the next level, right? So I messed around that whole year. I didn't go to class. I was cutting. I was doing all types of wild stuff, me and some of my friends. And I ended up getting for the whole year, I had 22 Fs for the whole year. Okay. 22 Fs. This is unheard of for me. I was a straight A student before that. This was my 8th grade year. And, in my mind, I thought, it's all right. What I'm going to do is, I had a plan, right? My plan was I was going to go to summer school, I was going to make it up, and I knew that I was going to pass the proficiency test because we had been doing it. I was like, this is kind of easy. So that's exactly what happened. We took the proficiency test in the 8th grade. I passed all 5 parts. Some other kids didn't, who was going to school regularly. So my teachers were a little baffled, like, hold on, like, you're not coming to school, you got all these Fs, but like, how did you pass this test, right? I was like, yeah, whatever, I passed the test. They're going to let me go to the next grade. And they was like, nah, we're not. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, I failed? And it was like, yeah, you failed. You had 22 Fs. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I didn't think this was going to happen. I was like, but it's okay. I got a plan. I'm going to just go to summer school, right? So I got home. I told my mom this. I was like, it's like, I failed, blah, blah, blah. I was like, it's okay, Ma, don't worry. I'm going to go to summer school. And I'm going to make it up. I passed all the proficiency tests, it's okay, right? And she was like, you ain't going to summer school? I was like, what do you mean I'm not going to summer school? I was like, Mom, chill, it's free. I thought, she was like, no, I ain't about to pay for that. Like, you messed up, I ain't paying for it. I was like, no, it's cool, it's free. I already looked into it. She was like, I don't care if it's free. Like, that's not the point. You messed around and you didn't take your schoolwork seriously and you let it get to this point and you haven't been communicating with me. Like I was probably hiding my report cards from her and all of this, right? And she was like, no, you're not going. And I was like, what? Like, oh shit. That's when it all hit me. I was like, damn, like I'm about to be like in the 8th grade again. Like I'm hella old. I should be in 9th grade. You know what I'm saying? I'm like trying to go to high school. Like I'm about to be in 8th grade again. Oh, so that just tore my world up. So, that was a kick in my ass that I needed. And so I got kicked out of the gifted and talented program. It was like, no, you can't come back here, bro. Like you failed out. So I went to the school that was in my neighborhood, which was a very, very tough, rough school, Patrick Henry Middle School, for those that know it. And that was an experience, But I got there, and like I was saying, I was already, I was ready academically. I just needed to get my mind, my social order together. So I got to that school and I just focused. And I was like, all right, I can't fuck around. Like, I really got to get out this situation because, like, all my friends are in fucking high school now and I'm over here in middle school. I felt so ashamed and embarrassed. I was like, this is not cool. So basically I worked and the teachers was like, in the first quarter, they was like, what are you doing here? Because, I'm getting straight A's. They was like, hold on, this don't make no sense. And so I had the good opportunity to talk with the principal of the school because the teachers were like, man, this doesn't make sense. Like 2 quarters went by, I had straight A's. And it was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you here? So I talked to the principal and he was a black guy named Mr. Arnold. And we had a real conversation and I was telling him what was going on with me and why. He was like, what happened? I was just like letting him know I just was struggling with who I am and who I want to be. And I started doing the wrong things. So long story short, he told me that he can make some calls. So he put in a couple of calls and to some local high schools and was like, hey, I got a kid who's ready. He passed the proficiency test, right? So that did help me in the long run. It's like he's already passed the proficiency test. He's getting straight A's. He just needs another opportunity. So he asked me if I wanted to go to Collinwood High School. And I didn't, actually. That was like the rival school in my neighborhood. But I didn't want to take no chances. He was like, the dude from Collinwood says he got a spot for you in his freshman class. You want to go? I was like, yeah. He was like, I could call Glenville. That was my neighborhood school that I really wanted to go to, but I was not trying to risk it. I was like, nah, bro. Like, I'm going to take that. Whatever you got, I'm taking it. So anyway, I got promoted halfway through the year, and so I started doing 9th grade, right? And so I was always behind, like half a year in my credit. So I had to do night school and summer school sometimes and to get fully caught up, right? So I ended up doing all of that and I get to my senior year. I'm back on track. Academics are good. I'm ready to move on. There's a side note in this. My mom died in this transition, by the way. My 9th grade year, my 8th grade year, as I was actually, after I transferred to Collinwood, that summer from 9th grade to 10th grade, my mom dies. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, I get to senior year, right? And I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I don't have any concept about college. I don't understand. I just knew I had good grades. There was not too many people that went to college around me. I had one cousin who went, and he was kind of like my role model in that way. I was like, okay, he went to college, and everybody was always like bigging him up, and he looked happy. He was doing different stuff. He was playing football in college. He was hecka smart and hecka athletic. He went to Carnegie Mellon, and he was like an engineer student and a football player. So I was kind of like, I want to be like my cousin. But I didn't know how college worked. I thought you get recruited, everybody, not just athletes. So I was waiting for some college to recruit me because they thought like, hey, this kid's getting good grades. He passed the proficiency test, right? Like that was always a thing to me. Like he did it early, right? So I thought they was like tracking this stuff and was gonna recruit me. One day I got a postcard in the mail from Michigan State University, and it was for their engineering department. They basically had like a representative that was going to be in Cleveland and was inviting students to come down and hear about the program and do on-site application. So I thought this was my chance. I thought, oh, they're recruiting me. They want me to come to their school. This is what it is, right? Like I had this whole idea in my head. And so my uncle, who I was living with at the time, he took me downtown to I think it was at the Marriott, and I went and listened to their presentation. I was like, yeah, they're trying to sign me. Like I had this whole narrative in my head, like this is my opportunity. So I did the little on-site admissions thing and application. They waived the fee, and this was like early in my senior year. And I don't know, maybe like a month later, they sent me an acceptance letter.
Wow.
So I was like, I'm going to Michigan State. It was that simple. I didn't apply to other schools, like I was just like, okay, they want me, I'm gonna go here. I didn't know anything else, I didn't find out later that was not a recruitment. That was not for those scholarships. That was just like an information session. So
wow.
I had no idea about any of this. So that's kind of how I got out of Cleveland and Ohio. And that exposed me to Michigan and a shitload of debt by being an out-of-state student. Lesson learned. But that's how I came out of Cleveland.
Okay. Who or what influenced you the most as a child?
I think it really, I've been thinking about that question a bit, and I think it was the sort of collective community. Because I feel like I got a lot of things from a lot of different people. So there was a woman named Mrs. Cato who worked she was a volunteer in the church I grew up. And she was sort of like the youth director, unofficial title, right? So whenever there's a program, whenever there's a youth day, whenever there was Easter program coming up, Ms. Cato was always the person who's gonna give you an assignment. And so I learned about being respectful of my elders, because a lot of times I didn't want to do what Ms. Cato was asking me to do, but I couldn't say no. That wasn't an option. Like it was just, what time do I need to show up? That kind of thing. I learned a lot about self-discipline and, being like trying to have a healthy body from coaches that I grew up in. I played sports growing up, played basketball, ran track, ran cross country. And, the coaches that I had cared about me. Like they didn't just want me to play well. They wanted me to do well in school. So I learned that, adults have a big influence on people. And there was a moment where my basketball coach was also one of the track coaches when we got to the meet of champs. And I went to the meet of champs as a miler. When I played basketball, even though I lettered in basketball, I didn't get a whole lot of playing time. Now, my friends who know me now see me at 6'4", right? I was 5'9" in high school. Couldn't touch the rim, couldn't make a jumper, barely could make a layup, on a good day. And so, but I played, and one of the things that I contributed to the team was the conditioning. So I was a track athlete, so when we got ready to get ready for basketball season, we did a lot of road work. So I'm the guy out there like saying, y'all better come on, keep up. And so at the meet of champs, I'll never forget, Coach Theodis Broughton came up to me and he said, Greg, like, I want to talk to you for a second. I said, of course. And I think I was about to run my event, like within that next hour. And Coach Broughton was an adult who came up to me and said, I want to tell you something, I really respect you. And that's not something most adults will say to a kid, to a young person, 16 years old. And I said, why? He said, because I didn't play you a lot. You didn't get a lot of playing time, on basketball, but you never complained. You never had a sense, you just like being part of the group. You like being in practice, and that's kind of like the Allen Iverson thing about practice. Yeah, we're talking about practice. Practice was important, right? And so I learned that an adult could be self-reflective and that they could say something to you that would stick with you the rest of your life. Like I'm 61 years old, I haven't forgotten that conversation. I get a little emotional about that conversation even today because it was unexpected and it was from the heart. I learned things like, how to work hard. Because you had to work hard to get things. My parents were the kind of parents where you got a little allowance when I got to be a teenager, but generally you had to work for things. So I cut grass, as a kid. One summer we picked cucumbers for Mr. Baxter, who lives across the street. He had this little plot of cucumbers, and it was some of the hardest work I've ever done. I was a lifeguard at a swimming pool, so I learned how to work. I learned how to teach. I was a swimming instructor for kids, and so a lot of what happened for me growing up in that town was learning some basic values, learning some basic, and I won't say even though, but in the Christian church, and I'm not a Christian now, but in that spiritual training I got, I learned how to be empathetic. I learned how to contribute money to something, because you had to give a little money every Sunday in the offering. So there were like many of the values that I think are important around empathy and compassion, being self-reflective, taking responsibility for your own failures. I learned a lot of that growing up. And so I feel like the things that influenced me were really the entirety of that community. And of course, having good parents matters. Having good friends matters. That's lifelong friends from Pine Bluff to this day. So I would say those are some of the things that I learned growing up.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have 3 sisters. I have an older sister and 2 younger sisters. And growing up, I grew up with 2 of those sisters, and so I was the middle kid. And being the only boy, there were certain things I had to do that they didn't have to deal with. They didn't have to deal with the yard work the way I did. They didn't have to deal with cleaning up behind the dog the way I did. But my sisters are both, contributing members of society. My older sister she's retired military. My youngest sister is a Harvard-trained lawyer. My other sister is a business person in Los Angeles. She's owned her own business for years. And so family was definitely important. And even though I didn't have a lot of cousins who lived in Pine Bluff, because most of my mother's generation moved away when they were young adults. But my mom was one of the ones who stayed. And so when I think about like the family that was there, grew up around grandparents, both my grandparents, my grandmothers, I got to know my grandmothers and a grandfather. My mother's dad died when she was young, so I never met him. But the people who went to church that I went to would always say that I reminded them of him, like the kind of way I carried myself. And so I always kind of looked around to see what my, what lessons I might have learned from my grandfather had I met him. So I learned some of those lessons through other men who knew him.
I'm sure that makes a big difference. And one of the things I heard you talk about was some of the values that you got from being in the community and being able to be embraced in such a way at a young age and having that foundation, especially going from a segregated school and situation to, being fully integrated and things like that. So I'm curious about some of those values. How did those influence you as an adult, as you were growing up, after you finished high school rather, and and moved into kind of more professional career?
Yeah, I think that a couple of the values I would highlight would be, one, having a healthy curiosity about things. So when we started going to school, white kids, we had a lot of questions about what was it like for them, what was it like growing up, and most of these were, working class kids who were one step out of poverty, and a lot of very poor white kids, and so it gave me a better sense of other people. And the way I grew up, we were not taught to hate white people. We were taught to hate the systems that white people perpetuated. Our families were very clear about that. It was like, and that comes out of some of that spiritual background that, the belief that, everybody's created, for a reason. And everybody comes onto the planet for a reason. And how you move, how you talk to people, how you serve other people matters. And so I think one of the values is just valuing the value of the question, like being able to ask people, what is it like for you? What is it like for your family? What is it like for your parents? I'd say another one, it really goes back to work ethic, being able to have the sense that you work hard for the things that you want in life. I think another value is valuing elders. Being able to pay attention to what older people have to say. I've always enjoyed being around older people. I just like people, and I like younger folks for a certain set of reasons. I like older people, but the older people that I was around often would have something to teach, even though it might come out in a gruff kind of way. They always had something that was worthwhile, that you had to listen and pay attention to their perspectives. When I was a 10th grader, I wanted to learn how to fly planes. That was kind of like one of the first things I wanted to be, was a pilot. And I had this idea, I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And my high school counselor, Mrs. Nunn, I went in and I said, well, I want to go to Air Force Academy. I want to know the process, because you had to be appointed by your state senator, your U.S. senator, and all that. And she looked at me and she was sort of like, well, I think there's some other things that our community needs you to do. Like, being in the military may just not be the thing. And basically she was like, you're not going to the Air Force Academy. Like, I mean, I had never had an adult just tell me straight out, like, no, you don't get to do that. And I was like, it's college. It's, you know, it's paid for if you get in, right? And she was like, and I fortunately listened because she was right. I don't think I would enjoy being in the military. Somebody telling me what to do all the time. I might have learned how to fly planes, and my life would have been very different, I suppose. I think, you know, the values around compassion, being able to see other people's lives and have a sense that, you know, that could be you, but for the grace of God, as people used to say. And so I think that being able to understand like one's relationship to other human beings and be compassionate, be empathetic, understand that when you make a mistake, that you have to own that mistake. But those are the kinds of things I feel like I learned growing up that have served me well. Interesting.
I'm curious, what brought you to Oakland?
I came to Oakland in 1982 to go to law school. I had a great experience at Northwestern University in Chicago. Great in the sense that I met lots of friends, got exposed to some ideas that I would not have gotten exposed to. Probably the best thing that happened to me at Northwestern, well, I would say two things. One of the best things academically and sort of culturally was I got a chance to go to Africa for the first time. Wow. And I was a sophomore, was walking on campus one summer and saw a poster, and basically was like a picture of a giraffe, and it was like, want to go to Africa and get college credit. And I was like, where do I sign up? Like, where do you sign me up for this, right? And so it was a 6-week urban geography field study. Went to Kenya and got to do home visits. So we lived with, it was a group of 28 of us. 26 were white, 2 of us were African American. We got a chance to live in families that were with families who were coffee farmers, cattle herders, university professor. We got a chance to camp out at some of the game reserves and see, you know, the big game. But we also got a chance to swim in the Indian Ocean and climb Mount Kenya. And I got a chance to see the beauty and the depth of culture in East Africa. And so Northwestern was a great experience in that way. I met my oldest child's mom and first wife at Northwestern, and that was great. So when it was time to come to law school, I started looking around the country. We had just gotten married. We were planning on getting married, and I decided that I didn't want to go back to the South to be in school, and I'd grown up in the South. Had gone on summer trips on the East Coast to DC and other places to visit family, so I kind of had some experience to the East Coast. Had never been to California. And Chicago had these brutal winters when I was there in the late 70s. And so came out here to visit and then decided I wanted to be in law school out here. And so myself and Lucia, my first wife, came out here and we just kind of fell in love with California and decided to stay here and have been here ever since.
Wow. Oh, and it certainly had an impact, that, as you mentioned earlier, just being part of the community, being the people person, and then wanting to have that same foundation in Oakland is one of the things you mentioned too. So you got out and moved Michigan, at least while you were in school and doing that. What was the experience like for you in college once you got there and just started doing that?
College was great. Despite the racial dynamics on campus, you know, it's a large Big Ten university. You know, we got 60,000 kids there, and maybe 3% are black. And of that 3%, you know, for black males, a lot of us are playing sports, right? So, you know, it's just a terrible racial dynamic in that way, right? But at the same time, it's the safest place that I've ever been, right? So like, there's nothing happening there that's like too out of control. There's a lot of things that are happening actually that just don't get reported. But just in terms of like housing, right? Like I had a stable place to be. I had food every day. If I went to my classes, the instructors were going to be there. If I went to the bookstore, the books were going to be there. Like in terms of stability, it was one of the most stable places and the most beautiful places that I had ever lived. It's a very nice campus. So for me, it was just like just an eye-opening, you know? Like I had never been around white people before like that. I didn't have a single white friend growing up. I didn't have one in college either. But I at least got to be around white folks and kind of like make relationships and see folks. And it was very interesting in that way. It was real segregated still too, you know, like there were a couple dorms on campus that were pretty much the black dorms. It was the Brody complex and it was the Hubbard complex. And we were sprinkled around campus, you know, in other areas, but these are like on the two opposite ends of campus, which is so weird. So there's beef on campus, right, between the black kids in Brody and the black kids at Hubbard. Not a real like violent beef, but like a, you know, rivalry, you know. Mm-hmm. So it was just interesting. It was just interesting being there. But yeah, you know, I met my who is now my wife. You know, met longtime best friends there. I got socially active and got involved in organizations, doing student organizing, and for me, after a while being at Michigan State, I got into urban and regional planning, and that is when I began to understand why my experience was the way it was growing up in Cleveland. Like, before I got there, I had all these questions that were unanswered about why does the east side of Cleveland look like it does? Why are things so run down? Why is there so much poverty, but the west side is not like that? It's the same city, but all the black people live over here, all the white people live over there. Our neighborhood is just run down, trash everywhere, abandoned buildings. I didn't understand. How could this be the same city? And, you know, once I got to college, I got answers to that. The answers people were giving me around me were just not adding up to me. People were saying stuff like, oh, well, you know, black people don't want anything more than this. I didn't believe that. I knew I wanted more than this. And all the people around me seemed to want nice things and take care of things. That was another thing. Oh, black people don't take care of stuff. That didn't make sense to me. All of our family members working hard and taking care of the little things they got. I didn't get it. And then it was like, hey, it's always been this way. And I was like, oh man, that doesn't make sense to me either. I'm like, I don't feel like this is, I didn't know, but I just didn't feel it. Like, this couldn't have been the way it's always been. So, you know, nobody really gave me no real answers about like, yo, the ghetto was created. Like, this was not a accident. This was not some plan that black people had to live this way. So once I got to studying urban and regional planning, I got to look at the policies. I got to look at the history of residential segregation. Mm-hmm. I like to look at zoning ordinances, you know, just examining the firsthand documents really opened my eyes. It's like, okay, I can see this was a concerted effort by the government and the private industries to create ghettos that I lived in. So once I got that, I said, okay, I can unpack this and I can work with folks to change this.
Interesting, yeah. And just around that, I think it speaks so much, as you were saying, about your experience growing up, and you can see the overlap and how that impacts so many other people that you grew up with, and then, you know, across the country, just seeing how much the roles of redlining and racial steering and all those things brought us to a lot of the places that black folks live now, throughout, you know, everywhere. And I'm curious, after you started learning this and getting involved with this, was that part of the reason that you decided to move out west, or what fostered that decision?
So, when I became a planner, when I decided to study planning, I was first an engineering student when I got to Michigan State, and in my junior year, I decided to switch. What happened for me, I went to Detroit. I was a part of this student organization called the Multiracial Unity Living Experience. Mm-hmm. Essentially, we were a multiracial group trying to bring together, you know, black and white and other students on campus to talk about racism, sexism, gender, all kinds of topics, all critical conversations to bring about unity amongst the different folks that were on campus. And as a part of that, we would take this group of students to Detroit to meet Grace Lee Boggs and see the work of the Boggs Center. And that was my first time seeing people really like organize to work in their neighborhood to bring about change. So for me, that's what got me to switch my major. I was like, oh, this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do. So that got me into that whole field, and a field of study undergrad. And I just had I had a professor. Her name is June Manning Thomas. I took her Introduction to Urban and Regional Planning, and this is what really opened my eyes. Like, going to meet Grace, put the question like, hey, what is this and how can I do this? one of the directors of the program said, you should check out urban planning as a major. So I did. I took June's class, and it just blew my mind. And then from there, you know, I just got deep into the field. Once I'm getting ready to graduate, an opportunity comes around. There's a school called Clark University in Massachusetts, not Clark, Atlanta. This is in Massachusetts. It's a small private liberal arts college. They have a planning program there, and apparently they were looking to diversify their student body. They reached out to people like June Thomas and said, hey, you know, we have fellowships available for Black and Latino students to come and do master's work at our program. So she recommended me for that program, and I went. You know, I had to go through the application process and everything, but ultimately I got accepted, and then they provided me a full fellowship for 2 years to come study at Clark University. So that's when I left. I left Michigan State. You know, I graduated. My girlfriend or fiance at the time, we both moved to Massachusetts, and she started working there, and I started going to graduate school. And then I graduated from there, and that was a whole thing. Like, Massachusetts is a different racist kind of place. I remember the biggest thing, like when I drove over there, I remember getting on the 90 Turnpike, and once you hit Massachusetts, they have pilgrim hats on the freeway signs. Like once you get into Massachusetts, like they're proud of this shit. I was just like, wow. For me, I was like, oh wow. It felt like being in the South. You know what I'm saying? To me, you may as well replace that pilgrim hat with a Confederate flag. That's how I felt. So driving in, I was just like, wow, what is this place? Like they're really like happy about this pilgrim shit? Like, oh, where am I? And once I got there, I was like, oh, okay, I see I see this brand of racism here. It's a little different, but it's definitely there. So we had a whole experience around race and things like that. We had some student organizing we did there too, because the faculty was just off the chain. It was like, they didn't have a Black person on the faculty. And so a lot of things happened there. But ultimately, after 2 years, I got my degree, and my fiance, we actually got married, so now this is my wife, and you know, she definitely didn't want to stay in Massachusetts. I didn't. We didn't want to go back to the Midwest because the economy was very bad at the time, and she struggled already trying to get a job there before we left, a meaningful job. So we was like, well, what do we do? Where do we go? So we thought about going to the South, because you know, a lot of us was going to the South. Right, you know what I'm saying? We thought about going maybe to North Carolina, maybe Atlanta, maybe Houston, but ultimately, some of the people that I met in my program, they were from the Bay Area or from, you know, California. Like one of them was from Sacramento. And she was just like, hey, Q, like, you know, like, I know you're trying to figure out what you want to do, where you want to go. She was like, I really think you should consider Oakland. She was like, for what you're about and how you see the world and what you want to do with your life, like, you know, Oakland is probably a good place. I was like, California? Hell no, man, that's far. Like, that's like a place people visit where I'm from, you know what I'm saying? If they're lucky enough, like, yeah, go to California, you know, the place of Hollywood and celebrities and sunshine and beaches. It's like, whoa, like that's so far away, like, nah. But you know, she put the bug in our ear. And we start thinking about it, doing research, and it was like, well, shit, they did give birth to the Panthers out there, and we started seeing other things that were going on in the community, different events, different organizations. It was like, wow, like this seems like a good place to maybe raise our family, because we did want to have children at some point, and we wanted to be in community and work towards change. So we decided to visit one of the friends that were living out here at the time, and fell in love. Just fell in love with the place. Like, wow, like the weather is wonderful, and the people were great. And it was so diverse, and you know, it was different. It was just very different than the Midwest, you know, and the East Coast. You felt the progressiveness, you felt the radical history, you felt that people were on a different vibe, you know, and trying to do things a little different. So that was very attractive to us, and we drove across the country, moved here, didn't have jobs, you know, just had a little money saved, and it was like, we know we can make it, you know. We Midwesterners, you know what I'm saying? Like, we work hard and we don't have a lot. So we knew that as long as we could get out here and get a place to live, then we could get jobs and we can make it happen. Just me and her. We ain't had no kid yet or nothing like that. So
I hear that. So no, I'm certainly glad you were making it work.